All right, I guess I'll go ahead and start since there's only five of us and we're about five after anyway. Um, Welcome to the first EN Ultra Squad webinar. It's being hosted by the mods, which I believe there's only two of us. Those that don't know me is Tim Kronk and partner in crime, Gabe Peterson. And we're going to throw Tim Sullivan under the bus towards the end and get him to do some talking about throwing the bike in for the hack on the OS. Gabe came up with this idea, and I originally kind of floated by me as, "Hey, let's do a." Oh, here's Nam.
He's joining from the beat.
He first said, "Let's do an OS for ultra running," and I'm like, "I thought that was brilliant." Hey, Nam, welcome from Hawaii.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Get rid of that virtual background. It's disgusting.
Francis is here. How did he get the link? He must have got it from Facebook, Coach P.
I don't know.
All right, I'm going to admit him, and I'll talk to P about it later, see what he wants to do in the future.
All right, now it's a party.
Welcome, Francis. All right, anyway, this was Gabe's idea, was to actually come up with the OS for ultra running, and I thought that was brilliant, but what makes more sense is his second idea, and that was hacking what we already have. So keep in mind, this ideas that we're throwing around and talking about tonight are how to hack the OS specifically for somebody who actually plans on doing some ultra running. If you're just going to be a triathlete and you want to just do a 50K at the end of the year, you might want to just go the triathlete route and stay with that OS. But if you want to be a trail runner and your A events will probably be ultra, then you probably want to throw in some of these ideas into your OS to kind of develop along the way. What is the OS and when should it take place? That's kind of a good question, because Heather said, when's OS? When's our out season? When's our off season? And I got to admit, I don't have one anymore in Tucson, because we do running all year round. So it's kind of, you want to position it so that you can finish your out season with a good 12 weeks before your A event, so you can at least load up a specific plan and then train specifically for your event. Who is that? Is that Francis? Do I have to mute him already? Yeah, I muted him. Anyway, so
listening to trance music or something.
Yeah. So the OS really, it needs to be at least 3 months before your main event, and it can be whatever you want it to be based from that. But I think a good time of finishing it up is a good 12 weeks before, so you can get going on your other training specific for the event that you're going for. I wanted to share a couple of quotes, and then I'll kind of get going. It's since EN is a self-coached model, and we're being guided by the plans, Coach P, the moderators, and our peers, and the forums. Now it's Circle in Geneva, but in the end, in the bottom line, we're all self-coached. And everybody who knows me knows I'm a big fan of Bruce Lee, so I wanted to throw out a couple of his quotes and how I interpreted them and how they kind of apply to us. And the first one was basically, he says, a good teacher protects his students from his own influence. And he talks about, I read a couple of his books, he didn't like the word master because that kind of intimates that you know everything. He was a true believer in continued education, developing, and always improving. So he never wanted to be called master. He didn't want people to copy what he was doing. He wanted to be his own. And he came up, they used to say, you know, what's your style? What's your Kung Fu style? And he say, I have no style. So he said, no style is my style. And then some of his other quotes that I love on the same lines is, no limits is my limits. So that applies outward. But it's something to think about when you're developing your plan for your triathlon or your ultra. And then it takes me to his next quotes. Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own. And so it's always listening, taking advice, trying things, and developing your own system. That's how I think that we should kind of interpret this hacking of the OS, and basically any of your training plans going forward, depending on what your goals are. At least that's the way I kind of look at it. He studied all different kinds of martial arts, and he took pieces from everything and put it all together, and then he came up with his own. And so that was quite masterful, to use the word he didn't like. The structure of the OS is, it's always been about fast then far, and it's always been in the wintertime. But basically the structure, I think, has a periodized approach to it. There's the fast and the far, and specifically for, Pixie's back in the room, specifically for ultra running, I think is a good place for not only doing the original OS intent, but also focusing on any of your weaknesses that pertain to the ultra running field. And as always, working from your least specific to your most specific as you progress through the OS and then on into your next plans. So with that general structure and layout, I'm gonna hand it over to Gabe, who's gonna give us some specific ideas on how to apply hacking into this OS to fit the ultra running or trail running sport.
Says the host is disabled screen sharing. I guess we should try this before. So if you probably can click on me and make me a presenter.
All right, stand by. Stop video, mute, make host. You are now the host. You should have it now. At the bottom, there should be a share screen.
Yeah, it still says the host is disabled sharing. Let me see. Okay, let's see there. Okay, there, I enabled it. Let me share. Hopefully that is coming up.
Perfect.
Let me put in presentation mode and see if that works. Is it showing the presentation or is it showing the preview?
It's showing
the slide deck.
Oh, okay, that's super annoying. Okay, well we'll roll with this. We at least got screen sharing working. So I put together a few slides kind of to give us some structure to tee off on how to hack the OutSeason for ultra runners. So as Tim mentioned, my OutSeason is a lot shorter now than when I lived in Utah. This season ended about 3-4 weeks ago when Tim and I completed the Anza Borrego Traverse, which is shown there at the end. And it started in January. So in San Diego, my season pretty much is continuous. My OutSeason is a few weeks. But when I lived in Utah, you definitely got the the northern temperatures. We're socked in with snow, so I know what it's like to have to figure out clever ways to train indoors. So here's kind of what the outline for what we want to cover. If you remember back, anyone who attended the webinar we had a few months back, we talked about the secret sauce for ultra running. So they're the 4 keys of EN. We have the 8 pillars of secret sauce, so the 8 ingredients to the secret sauce to make a delicious ultra running burrito. How you can specifically hack that for your weekly runs, and then for folks who are in the northern climes like NAM right now, some pro tips for winter training. and then talk about cross training and how that fits into ultra training, because it'll be a little different than the standard out season plan. So you probably remember this. There were the 8 ingredients to the secret sauce. In the out season, what we're recommending is that you can't focus on all 8 of these. You want to do the things that are, the least specific to your A race, which is probably a few months out. Something like if you're doing a 100-miler, things like conditioning your gut will become really important closer to the race. But now you probably don't need to work on that. So the areas of focus for the out season are, specificity. So even though it might be tough to get outside, this is a great time to build your technical skill of running on a trail. I like to say that it's a technical sport like swimming or mountain biking. And this is a good time to push yourself because you're going to have a lower running volume. So instead of trying to master, technical skill of running down, you're running through a rock garden while your legs are dead because it's a big week, you can focus on things like descending, running over technical terrain. Should be at Maffetone heart rate, or I don't know, there's Bill. See, I guess I have to admit him now. 80 about 80% of your training should be at Maffetone heart rate or RPE. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Maffetone, the idea is a very low heart rate. It's 180 minus your age. I think we're getting some feedback. And the idea is it's not super scientific. Like you don't go out and measure your zones. The idea is this is a really low heart rate, and you want to get efficient at running a low heart rate, even if that's running up a hill, and that means you have to hike up the hill because you can't keep your heart rate low. After a while, you won't need the heart rate. You'll build up your RPE meter. You'll know what it feels like. So right now, if I'm out on a run, I can guess, and I look at my watch and I can guess within like 5 beats what my heart rate is just by how it feels. After a while, you don't even need that. But at first, if you're coming from like a road running background or triathlon background where you're used to staring at the numbers on a power meter and using that to measure your effort, it'll take a while for you to build up your own internal sensors, let's say. The other 2 are building your trail running economy. So this is key. This is a technical sport, and the faster you can go over technical terrain with the least energy expenditure is critically important. And the thing I highlight there is descending. I think I've done 17 ultras, and I would say about 90% of ultra runners are very poor descenders. They're great at crushing the hills. So it's just like triathletes on the bike, crush the hills and then soft pedal down where the free speed is. It's kind of the same idea. It's the difference is you have to have some pretty good technical skills to run downhill fast. So this is a great time to practice that while you have fresher legs. You don't have the kind of volume in your legs where your legs feel super heavy. And then probably the last one, but maybe the least important of this list is the idea of becoming a mountain goat, getting that vertical in. Here, you're definitely not going to do a 15,000 foot vertical week in the out season, but you still want to get some vertical. You want to get maybe 3, 4, 5,000 feet of vertical a week. So you're practicing climbing, and I think more importantly in the out season is practicing descending, capturing that free speed. Anything you want to add to this slide, Tim?
No, that looks good.
Okay, so this is I actually logged into Final Surge and I loaded up the Run Focus out season plan. This is week 1 from the Run Focus plan. And you can see it's got some of the classic EN workouts like running intervals, strides, lots of strides. The long run, which if you're an ultra runner, you wouldn't call an hour and 10 minutes a long run. That's just your daily run. That might even be a short run. But we're going to give you advice on what your long run should be in the out season. There's a lot of cycling in here, even for the run focus. And that's great. If you're, like Tim said, if you're going to do an Ironman and then you just want to, at the end of your season, do a 50K for fun, probably this plan's going to work great for you. But if the major focus of your season is ultra running, the key thing will be to run a lot. And so what we did is kind of took that weekly schedule and suggested a lineup of workouts, and you're free to change the order of the days. But kind of going from left to right, I generally like to have Monday as a recovery day to recover from the damage that I've done over the weekend. It's also a good day to do strength training. We could have a whole webinar on strength training, but I think it's important for all athletes, but especially for ultra runners, because it's really a full body sport. It's not just legs. So you can't get away, as an ultra runner with having like Ethiopian arms. That won't work. If you're going to do mountainous ultras, you're transitioning from being a Lamborghini to a Jeep, like one of the jacked up Jeeps, 4x4 Jeeps that you see out in the desert crawling over rocks. So strength, I think, is important, but just giving yourself time to recover. But then the thing you'll notice is every other day you're running. So if the major focus of your season is ultra running, I'd recommend you targeting running 6 times per week or more, if you can even do more. And we'll talk about, hey, what if I'm running 3 or 4 times a week right now? I can't just jump to 6 times a week. We'll talk about some strategies for how to transition to higher running frequency. So the quality workouts are similar ideas to some of the kind of interval training, but they're more adapted to if you're doing these out on the trails. So going out and doing 5 by 250 meters on the trails, that's pretty hard to do. Who knows what distance you've run, what kind of terrain you're going to cover. So in place of kind of an interval run, usually a great alternative is the fartlek run, where you just pick, hey, I see that tree that looks about a minute or 2 ahead of me. I'm just going to run hard to that tree. And I'll highlight here, we don't have any paces here. There's no run at marathon pace, run at TRP. Everything is by effort. Like to say that speed is really just an output for trail running, just like speed is an output on the bike. You can ride into a headwind and you're putting out great watts, but you're slow. Ride into a tailwind, you have a great day. It's kind of the same idea. So the only thing you can control is your effort, and that's why that kind of building the RPE meter becomes important. A lot of easy runs at Maffetone heart rate or effort. So after you kind of have dialed in what that really easy feels like, that you're doing a lot of runs at that effort. You can still mix in strides. Those are great for building biomechanical efficiency. Again, do these on the trails, because this is where you want to be fast. You don't want to be fast on the track as an ultra runner. I guess it's nice, but you want to be fast on the trails. So doing strides on an uneven surface, where you have to jump over rocks and things like that. That way you can do it when you have an actual race. Mixing in cross training, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Other quality sessions would be hill sprints. And again, these are pretty short. It's like 30 seconds. Find a steep hill. If you don't have hills, stairs, run up them hard and then jog down to recover, and do that 5 or 6 times. Another alternative is trail tempo, which is, again, There's no pace here. This is at, you know, a hard effort, but not all out effort. And this gets you used to running fast on the trails. So you build up, you can be fast on the trails during your races. So you do something like 2 to 4 times a half a mile to a mile. And then with your Garmin, that's pretty easy to track. You know, hits the mile lap, I'm going to run to the next mile at a hard, but not all out effort. Again, no pacing. One of the things we'll kind of hammer on over and over is learn to forget about pace for the most part in ultras. That mostly it's going to be by effort. More easy run that at Maffetone on, you know, this is, you can follow this schedule on a Friday. And if you don't want to do the heart rate thing, so people don't like wearing heart rate monitors while they're running, easy way to tell is if you go out running on a social run, like you could carry on a full conversation like this while you're running. One trick I used when I was transitioning, and I could, you know, if I was by myself, I like to listen to music on the run, is I would sing the lyrics. And if it took effort for me to sing the lyrics, then I knew I had to slow down. The long run. So the long run, this is the idea here in the out season is you want to get the minimum effective training dose to maintain that that high end endurance. So yeah, I did my kind of N=1 experiment on this last year when we were moving from Utah to San Diego, and I was super busy, so I couldn't go out and do a 5-hour run. So I experimented with myself to figure out what was like the minimum amount I had to do to maintain that high end endurance where I could go out and run a 50K. And I actually did that. Me and Tim did Behind the Rocks early last year, and I had not done longer than a 2.5-hour run leading into that 50K. And it worked just fine. So I think at a minimum, it needs to be an hour and a half to get that training effect. Beyond 2.5 hours, you'll do that later as you get closer to your race. But at this point, you want to make sure you're keeping that high end endurance, but also making room that you can recover from some of the quality that you've mixed in. And then again, you fall in it. You know, you're not doing back-to-back long runs in the out season. That'll come later. As you get closer to your race, you'd follow that up with an easy run, maybe some cross training, which we'll talk about cross training. Anything you want to add to this slide, Tim? Or I'll pause for questions. I'll have a drink of my beer.
No, I thought of two things. One, on the long run, get in the habit of turning your watch on and letting it run from the start to the finish. None of this triathlete hitting the stop every 5 seconds when you stop to take a pee or fuel up or something. Because the clock doesn't stop running when you're out there. So that's something that's good to get in the habit of, and it gives you an idea how much time you're messing around doing other things. And the other thing on the technical, I just watched that Golden Trail Championship movie that Matt posted the other day in Geneva, and it's a 4-day stage race for the pros. It's not really ultra, but I guess if you put it all together, it is. But it was pretty hardcore trail racing, and there was distinct differences from athlete to athlete in their climbing, descending, and technical abilities, and these were all pros. So great 1-hour documentary of a stage race. Pretty impressive, I thought. It was a great movie. But you get to see the differences in high-end athletes that still have a weakness versus someone else. You know, that one may climb better and one may descend better. That was very, very obvious in the movie. But that was it.
Cool. Yeah, and that reminded me when I was looking at the slides, I think on that long run, because we're going to talk about, you know, what if you're in the northern areas where you can't get out a lot. Like when I lived in Utah, the out season I would do indoors during the week for the most part, except, you know, when we'd have a spell where it didn't snow. Just because I was getting up early, I had to do it in the dark, and going out running in the dark in the snow, not always a lot of fun. But I always made sure I got out on the weekend, and And we're going to talk about how to get the vertical on the up if you have to work indoors. But really, if this is the one time you're getting out on the trails in the week, is focus on deliberate practice on the descending. It's a good time to practice your descending skills. So I'll kind of beat that horse until it's dead. Just because it's free speed, and most ultra runners do not work on their descending skills. Similar to most triathletes don't work on their descending skills on bikes. So pro tips for the winter. Here's some advice. If you're in the northern regions, if someone told you to buy a treadmill, Francis, you could do this, which is, I was an early adopter of Zwift running, like when it was a beta. Where was it, like a Easter egg feature? You had to like double click on this hidden spot on the screen to get into, because this was great in the winter. I even bought a treadmill, a Bluetooth treadmill that transmits the incline to Zwift, so I can get vertical in. Because I always felt like I would do like these vertical workouts, like run up to a volcano, and then it showed 0 vertical on my file, and I felt like I got cheated. If you don't want to do that, there's an app called RunCline that works on your phone that will take the data from your foot sensor, from the foot pod, and you'll manually put in the treadmill's at a 9% grade, and it transmits that to Zwift. So I know like Brian Hagan has used this. So even if you don't have a treadmill that transmits grade, you can do this.
Hello, Kevin.
I think you're unmuted, Francis.
Oh, sorry.
You have 2 Francises going, dueling Francises. So this is an actual screenshot. This was one I would do in the winters. I'd run up Alpe du Zwift on Zwift. It was always fun because all the cyclists you get a fun reaction from them as you're running up. Sometimes you run past them as they're trying to spin up. It's a great workout. You get over 3,000 feet of vertical. It's about an average of 8% grade. My advice would be smooth out the bumpiness, because on the bike the grade will change a lot. And I would usually just say, all right, it's about an average of 8, and I would leave it at 8. And then when I hit the turns, I would lower it for like 10 seconds to get a little bit of recovery, and then I would put the grade back up to like 8%, 9%. It's a great way to get the vertical on the up, but it's not going to simulate the down. And I usually would go with just getting the descending skills. When I went out on the weekend, I would really focus on, I'm gonna hammer the descents, so I can improve. There are ways, I've heard of people doing this with the treadmill, where you put cinder blocks under the treadmill to raise it up. I don't know. I don't accept any liability if you try that and you fall off your treadmill. There are treadmills that decline. There are not a lot of them, but you can get the vertical in, and I think Zwift is a fun way to do it. It's not too bad. In fact, many of you know that I ran 100 miles on Zwift earlier this year. It was actually pretty fun because different folks from EN would join in, and we'd run together. We'd talk on Discord. It went by really fast. So it's a good option. I think Zwift running is actually free. You don't even have to have the paid account to use the running. At least that's the way it used to be. So cool option. Get your vertical in on the treadmill, at least the up, and then when you're outside, really make sure you focus on the descending. I know, Tim, you don't put in a lot of time on the treadmill, but any thoughts here?
No, I don't do treadmill, but on that, there's a website, Fell Running, FELLRUNNING, Fell Running, and it's mostly European, but they have a section on there where they build up the back of the treadmill quite high, and they pound the downhill on that, and they swear by it. So if you're interested in doing that to your treadmill, go to fellrunning.com and poke around. You'll find it.
Yeah, The first step, Francis, is buy a treadmill, and then you can then you can implement these strategies. Uh, another pro tip. When I lived in Utah, I actually loved getting out on the weekends in the snow. It was super fun. There's no one out there. So, first I thought, well, I'm going to have to pick up something like Nordic skiing. That's a fairly technical sport. And at the time I was already doing triathlon. So it's like, I don't know if I can add another sport into the mix. And so I discovered snowshoe running. And so these are different than your typical snowshoes. There's a picture of them there on the left, the TSL Symboys race. They're actually snowshoe races. And these are designed to run on a groomed track. They only weigh about a half a pound per snowshoe versus a typical snowshoe can weigh like 2 to 3 pounds. I tried running in those. It was brutal. And then I said, okay, I need to find something lighter. So I did research on what do people are running these snowshoe races wear. And this is what they're mostly wearing. There may be some other ones. It's been a couple of years since I've done this. But it's a great way if you live in the northern regions where you'd have like Nordic skiing, you have trails where fat bikes are frequented, snowmobiles, anything that will groom that. These are not great for backcountry snowshoeing. I tried that and I ended up having to follow my friend who had regular snowshoes as he kind of broke trail. You're going to get a super hard workout. It's incredibly hard to run in these snowshoes. And you're also going to build those technical skills. So this is where I would practice on, it was snowy out. I would run really hard downhill. And the advantage if I fell is I just fell in the snow versus I fell in the dirt and rocks and things like that. So I'd fall in the snow, get up and keep running. If you can run fast in snowshoes downhill in snow, running down a trail will seem very easy afterwards. Yeah, anyone else? I wonder if anyone here has tried running in snowshoes before. I think Brenda, I've seen her post about it. Oh. No, okay. So let's see, cross training. I think this is probably where, Tim Sullivan, it'd be great to have you join in and talk about how to work in cycling for ultra training. But here's some ideas. Power hiking. So hiking gets a bad rap. Everyone thinks of a hike as like you go out with your kids, you do a leisurely stroll through the park at like 2 miles per hour. That's nice. But this is really intentional practice. It's a good opportunity for you to learn how to use trekking poles. A lot of ultra runners don't train with trekking poles all year, and then they show up to a mountainous race and use trekking poles for the first time. It involves some skill, but it also involves strength. It'll work your arms and your back quite a bit. Usually when I've gone a couple months without using the poles and I start rotating them in, my arms and back are more sore than my legs from these runs. And like I said, you really want to go with intent. So this is a great opportunity to get vertical. That's it. The picture is actually me on the John Muir Trail. Or if you can't get vertical, like sometimes I do this on the treadmill. I do this sometimes during work calls, like a boring work call where I don't have to talk a lot, and I don't have to be on video. As I'll get on the treadmill and set it at 4 miles per hour and just make my slow fast. And it's pretty amazing in ultras. I remember my first 100, these seasoned ultra runners would just hike right by me while I was like jogging uphill. I would jog, stop and hike, and then they'd hike back past me, and we keep leapfrogging over and over. This is just free speed. If you can hike at 4 miles an hour, that adds up over a long course ultra like 100 or a 200, where a good fraction of that time is hiking. It adds up into hours and hours. Cycling, lots of fun. I'd say the key here is if you wanted to improve your running, you should go hard. These should be hard sessions. it can also be very helpful for recovery. Just, like 30 minutes of easy spinning will promote recovery. But if the goal is you want to improve your running, you want to build that engine, and you can't get out, say you can't get out 6 times a week, but you have a bike trainer, is you want it to be hard. If you can get out, a mountain bike is a great way to build up your technical skills for running, because you'll get much better at picking a line down a trail, especially. So when I first started mountain biking, I tended to like circle around all the rocks and everything. I was weaving down the trails, and my mountain biking buddies are like, "No, you don't weave around everything. You're on a mountain bike. You go over it." And it's the same idea in trail running. There's a rock, run over the rock, run up the side of the rock, jump out over the top of it, instead of running around and adding a bunch of extra distance. I was surprised at how much this translated to picking my line while running. Is like, in mountain biking they call it, you have to have vision. You have to see the trail. Like a lot of early mountain bikers will stare right down in front of where they're going. Same thing that a lot of ultra runners will do. And on a mountain bike, you just look ahead, and from your kind of peripheral vision, what's right in front of you. Winter sports. So again, if you're in the northern regions, cross-country skiing or skate skiing, this was something I always wanted to take up in Utah. Everyone said this is a lot of fun. I just never got around to it. And once I discovered snowshoe running, I didn't really feel the need to go out and pick up another sport. This would be one case where skimo is actually probably applicable. A lot of elite ultra runners in the off season or out season do skimo because it sounds like it's a great uphill workout. I don't know how much the downhill will help you become a better ultra runner, maybe picking your line, things like that, but definitely the uphill will. And then again, if you can't run 6 times a week, just getting out and hiking. So going out, if you don't have running snowshoes, but you have regular snowshoes, go for a snowshoe hike. Great cross training there. So Tim, maybe talk about your experience adding, with cycling to build for ultras.
Yeah, so my getting into ultra was just sort of by accident because I wanted to build endurance and sort of get that pain threshold high. So when I did that, what I learned was the running takes its toll the most on your body, and your bike will initially suffer as you're sort of doing adding those miles and the frequency. But like you said, running every day, I think or 6 times, even if it's super simple, is like the number one thing you have to do. If you don't do that, you don't learn how to run. You don't build the endurance. You keep getting these little niggling injuries or whatever, those injuries that just happen because you don't run a lot. And then you don't learn to where you put your feet. But if you can get through that, the bike you can keep really hard, and your bike will not suffer after a little bit, and you'll be able to go hard. But one thing that you can do on the bike is you can keep your OS bike exactly as you want and even add more. And like you said, go as hard as you want. And then after a hard session, go out and do a 2 mile easy run or whatever, or do your long run after that. Like you talked about hacking the plan. What's the minimum I need? Well, if you just did a 2-hour bike ride that was fairly hard, and then you go add 2 hours of running with some power walking in there, you've got it. Because what I learned was biking helps climbing. I never get tired climbing on trails. I just don't get tired. I don't run up them, but I'm not slow. And then you can practice your downhills and stuff. And sort of one thing on that is what I'd say is some of the best advice on the downhill is, when you're a kid and you sort of put your arms out like you're a plane. Well, that's the feeling you should have when you're going downhill. You should feel free and light, like you're a plane flying down the slopes as fast as you can. You feel free to make noises. I mean, it really helps because you can go really fast. And the other one was take double the number of steps you think you need to take. Because then you won't have your feet out in front and you won't stub them as much, and you'll just have a better footing. But yeah, so what I'd say is, just keep the bike hard and then go do your runs and do that. And eventually, when I was doing a lot of biking and a lot of running, I could go do a long run that was hard, and then my bike really wasn't bad, 5 hours later, which was really surprising. I mean, it surprised me. But it's like if you're running all the time, you develop the muscles, you get the whatever, and you're going to be okay. Be tired. And if I was going to give up anything, at least what works for me is I don't need the speed work near as much as I just need the time on the trails, or I need the time out running. For me, my speed's always sort of there. So if I taper, I can have speed for like an Ironman. I mean, that's sort of when I did the Boston qualifying. It was not based on marathon train. I did a very short marathon train build. It was based on my endurance. A 3 hour, 4 hour run's way easier than a 9 to 12 hour run. So you can really push a lot harder. And so that'd be my recommendation. See what works for you. But going out and running tired, I think, is a good thing. And then just keep the bike. And that way, if you're doing Ironmans, which a lot of people here are going to, you can still build up the other things that you need and do that. Now, if you're a brand new triathlete, then you're going to have trouble just sticking to the bike and not dying just on that, because it's hard. The out season's hard with all that stuff. But if you have some experience, you've got to learn what works for you. Like what Tim said, there's, what works for one person does not work for another person. It's like the number one thing in plans. And that's why this platform's great, because you learn from other people and you try it. So that'd be my advice.
I got some questions for you, Tim.
Yeah.
I totally agree that climbing on a bike is very similar to climbing on the run. At least it is for me. If I spend extended time seated climbing on a bike, I believe it works the same general muscles of my lower back, my glutes, and my hams as when I'm leaned forward and power hiking or running up a steep climb after. So I totally believe that those two are interacted. My question for you is, especially since you don't seem to do much speed work when running, but I know you do an awful lot of speed work on the bike.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most beneficial of your biking? Do you think it's more muscular, or do you think it's more VO2 high zone work where you're not getting that by your running? So and then the third part of that is, what do you think of big gear work? And do you do any of that? So the question is, do you think it's more muscular, or is it more cardio at the high end in the zones, and then again, big gear work? What do you think of that?
So I think it's a mixture of all that, because one thing I learned on Zwift, if you want to become even just good on Zwift, you have to do all the courses. And I really don't like climbing on the bike, but I don't shy away from races that are climbing on the bike. And I try to vary the lengths and do that. So I try to get it to where it's a mixture of stuff, maybe a 20-minute climb, or, on one day, it has a huge climb at the end or whatever, or 6-minute climbs or 3-minute climbs. So you're at a high heart rate for all that stuff. And I try to get the speed work all on that. When I do speed work running, I usually do 6-minute efforts. And when I go to that, I do that really fast. If I do that, I don't, and I'll do some strides. I think strides are good. And then for the big gear work, I don't go really low. Like I know some people really grind really slow, and it's just hard enough on some of those climbs for me just to keep. I try to keep a high F. I try, as many watts as I can. If I drop low, I just can't get that. And I've not been on an ultra course where it seemed like it was like low gear work would be really helpful, at least in my opinion. it just didn't seem like that. But it is weird on the bike though, that when you're climbing up stuff, and if you've done enough biking or running, you don't have to keep doing that. Because I see a lot of people suffering on climbing. And then, but like Gabe said, more so on the descending. People will pass me on climbs, and then I'll whiz by them down on the downhills. But yeah, I always go with philosophy as running can hurt you, and it can get you out of the game for a long time. And the only time I ever have any problems running is if I run too fast. And if I do 200s or 400s, I have a high risk of, pulling a hamstring or just getting a tweak, like, oh my God, why did I do that? And I try to avoid those things now. And that's, I'm sure you've noticed as you've gotten older, you can't just go run 100 without doing anything else. So yeah, the biking, that does help though. And then just the frequent running, like Coach P says, even 15 minutes of running, you go out and you see where your feet are landing, you see where your cadence is, you see where whatever, and it's quality at that time. Whereas if you keep going past 30 minutes, 45 minutes, you don't do those things anymore. So I think that's another reason why the daily running helps.
Like it.
Yeah, and if you can do those events, like around here, we have the, you have a bike and then followed by a run. I know there's some races out there. You could do a mountain bike followed by a run on the same day. I think those races would be great to do. They'd fit right in the OS,
I gotta
show you what to.
One of my training days I do here is it's about an hour and 10-mile mountain bike ride, gently uphill the whole way. And then I hide my bike and I run a 10-mile loop on the trails, and then I ride home, and home is downhill all the way, thank God, because you're cooked. And it only takes about 40 minutes to get back at that point. But it's a great, 3 to 4 hour day, depending on what the hell is that sign behind your head, Tim?
That's my daughter's favorite sign.
All right. But yeah, that's great to do that. Run, bike, run on dirt.
Yeah, I think mountain biking especially is really transferable. Because mountain biking is you're generally like you're going up a hill and you're grinding, and that I think that directly translates to running up hills. And then when you go downhill, you're building your technical skills to descend. I love mountain biking. I did when I was in Utah, I did the Xterra off-road triathlon. That was a lot of fun. The swim is about the same as a regular triathlon, but then the mountain bike is basically like ride the mountain bike up in a mountain and then descend down the mountain and then do a run through trails. So super fun. And I found that it helped a lot. Right now I mostly run. I do some mountain biking. I think it's good. I'd add to what both the Tim said, is at some point you're going to get a running niggle where you just need to give it a couple of days to rest, and then you want to have another sport you can fall back on, versus you go hit the couch and start binge watching Netflix, and then you wake up a few months later and you haven't trained. I get the running niggle, I'll usually switch to, all right, I'm just going to mountain bike for a day or two, and give myself some time to heal. So having another sport, I think, is important, because running, you are going to get minor injuries. It's just part of the sport. Sometimes you can run through them, but sometimes you just need a couple of days to let your body heal. Great. What other questions do we have here from the audience? From Steve, Bill, Sabra, Francis. Francis, you should buy a treadmill.
Yes.
You gotta live in Canada and be an ultra runner. You should have a treadmill. That was the first thing I bought when we moved to Utah. I'm like, I'm gonna need a treadmill.
Yeah, but there are no available anymore in any stores. So it's sold out everywhere. So I got an excuse for this year.
Yeah.
So
How
nobody has a
about
question?
Steve, Sabra, Bill? Any questions?
I'll throw out one, Gabe, the same one I asked you yesterday. How to determine what should be an OS focus versus something you should put in your specificity in the last couple months. And my example to Gabe was I'm preparing for the Cocodona 250 in May. So I know I need a lot of backpack work, carrying gear. And I'm doing strength work now, but I definitely don't want to be doing that 5 months out. So how do you determine what's beneficial in an OS versus what's beneficial in your specificity?
Yeah, I think some of those things like, jumping back to the secret sauce, like the power hiking, that's an option for cross training. Or if you can't run 6 days a week, instead of running, go out and go for a hike. It'll have about the same effect. Go instead of run 6 miles, hike 6 miles, but do it with intent. Things like, in Cocodona, that is going to be like a 250-mile eating contest. Success is going to be how much food you can shove down while also running. But now, that's in May, 5 months out, are you going to go and slam a vegan cheeseburger?
What are you doing? I'm training. I'm training.
Yeah, it might be fun. But that's probably something about 8 to 12 weeks out that you want to train. Like and when you're going out for those super long runs, you're going out for I'm going to go out all day on the trails. I would do things like, we had leftover pizza in the refrigerator. I'm gonna wrap that up in foil, and I'm gonna take leftover pizza in my pack and eat that. It sounds kind of disgusting at first, but after a couple of hours of running, leftover pizza is delicious. It sounds disgusting, eating a cheeseburger in a 200-mile race, but there's nothing more delicious than a cheeseburger in a 200-mile race, or hot dog.
Some people even eat hot dogs out here.
Yeah. If you can take down 3 hot dogs in an ultra, you get a prize.
I do think it's good to eat whatever you're going to eat just normally before you go run. Don't try to get in this thing of like, if you want a burrito, try it. If you want this, try it. I mean, it's, you learn what you need.
Train your gut to be unbombable.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, don't worry about you're going to run. You're not going to sprint usually. If you're going to go sprint, maybe you don't want to do that, but.
Yeah. And also, Tim, don't underestimate the weight of your backpack after 3 days. It's going to be heavy.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that's something I don't want to be doing now. I'm building my body to be able to do that, but I don't want to be carrying that around for the next 5 months. But it's so I'm like, and I know enough to not put it in right now, but it's got to still get in there a couple months out. So I'm trying to figure out how and when. But it was just a question.
For me, that one would be that's where the strength training now will pay off later of building up a strong core. When you're running with like a 15-pound pack, it'll use a lot of core. Like when I was getting ready for Moab, I would load up my pack. It had all the winter gear that we had to carry, and it was like 100 degrees outside. So I'm running around like this 15-pound pack loaded with winter gear. And the next day, my legs were okay, but my core was actually sore, and my shoulders were so sore. But I just did that all my long runs for about 8 weeks before Moab, and I didn't get any shoulder soreness at all at Moab. I wore my pack for 90 hours. And wasn't sore at all in my shoulders. Other areas definitely sore, but like my shoulders and the pack, I could have kept wearing that thing. But at first, like the first time I went out with a fully loaded pack, I was in a lot of pain. But at this point, I would say the strength training is what's going to set you up for success later on, where you have to carry a heavy pack.
Yeah. All right, we're almost at an hour, I think, and we just wanted to throw out. Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Topics for the future. So here were some that Tim and I kind of brainstormed on. That topic there. When should you transition to the race season? When do you go from the out season to the race season? And then we could talk about things like that. If you're doing Cocodona, when should I start carrying my heavy pack? If there's interest in that, happy to talk about that. Introduction to fast packing. So I learned a lot about fast packing this year. I fast packed the John Muir Trail in under 6 days. This time last year, if you asked me about fast packing, I knew very little about it. But there's a lot of gear knowledge that you really have to master because the gear will keep you alive out there. But there's also a lot of specificity. It's not a 15-pound pack like a 20-miler. It's a 25-pound pack, which sounds light. If you've ever gone backpacking, you've had the typical 40-pound pack, but try running with a 25-pound pack. It's an experience. So I'm happy to distill some of the things I've learned into fast packing, especially in COVID times. All my races were canceled, but was able to just make my own adventures by just going out and have all the gear. I can go out and do something like the John Muir Trail, or Tim and I ran across the Anza Borrego Desert, the first humans in history to ever run across the Anza Borrego Desert. But I just had all the equipment, so it was pretty easy to swing that. Another topic would be going stupid long. If you're a triathlete and you want to do like a 50K, 50 miler, it starts getting a little different, but things like a 100-mile race, or if you want to do Cocodona, which Tim and I are signed up for, or Moab, or any of the other 200s, it's a totally different race than doing a 50 or less. So I thought we could do like, what do you want to do specifically in 100 miles and beyond? And then once we get to the end of the year, we're thinking do like a lessons learned. Like everyone on this webinar hopefully is going to go out and do some epic events. We'd love to just do like Tim Sullivan, you have the 100K coming up at the beginning of the year, if I remember correctly.
I dropped to 50K.
Okay.
I wasn't trained enough for that. Like you said, 100K at 60 miles is a lot different than a 50K.
Yeah.
And my
50K
son wanted to pace me, so he's going to run the 50K. I signed him up for the 50K, so it's going to be me and him doing it.
Awesome.
And it's a tough race. So I mean, we'll go slow because I told him he's going to be hurt.
So I would love to give everyone like 10 or 15 minutes. Like, I did these races, and here's what I learned. And then are there other topics you guys would like to see? We're happy to research them or put together our thoughts on it.
No, huh? All right.
All right. Well, I think that is the first official Ultra Squad webinar.
All right, you're the host now, so you can end it whenever you want. Nobody else
Thanks,
has any
Gabe.
questions?
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks
Thank you,
everyone for
everybody.
joining.
I think you just ended, Gabe, and it captures everything and goes to P. So
Okay, awesome. Thanks everyone.
at least that's
Have
what
a
it says.
great year of ultra running.
Yep.
All right.
Our
Bye.
races are still on.
Yeah, even if they're not on, you just make your own race.
That's true.
All right. Bye.
See ya.